Yeah, Chris and Anya, the only reason you were able to watch any of these is because Kathy reminds me every session to push the record button. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. Okay, we're going to start on page 162. And I just wanted to back up so that we could read the whole poem in context, because we did about half of it last week. And Chris and Anya, this is what Rohr calls his coda, and also Allison and Ryan. This is what he calls his coda. We finished the main text of the book, and there was this one little piece at the very end where he takes this poem by Richard Rohr, and he felt that it was a good ending for the book. And he breaks it down, and then we've been discussing it as well. So it's called When in the Soul of the Serene Disciple. When in the Soul of the Serene Disciple. So I'll read the poem again in its entirety, and then we'll just go through quickly the parts that we did last week, and then we'll dig in more to the stuff that we haven't covered yet. So, Thomas Merton. When in the soul of the serene disciple, with no more fathers to imitate, poverty is a success. It is a small thing to say the roof is gone, he has not even a house. Stars as well as friends are angry with the noble ruin. Saints depart in several directions. Be still. There is no longer any need of comment. It was a lucky wind that blew away his halo with his cares, a lucky sea that drowned his reputation. Here you will find neither a proverb nor a memorandum. There are no ways, no methods to admire where poverty is no achievement. His God lives in his emptiness like an affliction. What choice remains? Well, to be ordinary is not a choice. It is the usual freedom of men without visions. So we commented last week that that's pretty opaque, so we're going to break it down a little bit here. Rohr writes, this poem has spoken to me from the first time I read it in his Hermitage, that was in Thomas Merton's Hermitage, in 1985. And I offer it to you as a simple meditation that you can return to again and again to summarize where this journey has led us. And then he's going to break it down. So just to remember, we're talking about the second half of life. We're talking about a complete sea change between the first half, which is exteriorly oriented, and the second half, which is going to look interiorly for meaning, purpose, and ultimate identity. But that second half brings with it so many other pieces, and that's what this poem is bringing out. And this is what Rohr is trying to say as he closes his book. So just take the first line, when in the soul of the serene disciple. Rohr comments on it, at the soul level and with peacefulness of time. We talked about this in terms of the 4 S's, silence, simplicity, solitude, and stillness, and the second half of life. So the serene disciple is one who has moved into the second half, and all of the things that we worry about and all the things that we're anxious about start to subside as we're finding that interior true self that isn't disturbed by all those circumstances and by everything that's going around outside of ourselves. He says, with no more fathers to imitate, when you have moved beyond the authoritative, the collective, and the imitative, and you have to be your true self. We talked about this in terms of graduating obedience. We're no longer just following rules. We're no longer just coloring inside the lines. We're no longer just following the culture of our churches or the rules of our groups, but we're actually transformed from the inside out so that everything we do feels like liberty, feels like being unrestricted, and yet it's still going to be very much other-oriented, other-centered, and it's going to be like we're a law unto ourselves. We will do the things that the law requires without having to follow the rules anymore. Beyond obedience, there's an awareness and a presence and a spirit that instructs us moment to moment, in the moment itself, without us having to revert back to standards. On the next page, 164, Poverty is a success. It is a small thing to say the roof is gone, he has not even a house. Richard Rohr writes, when you have made it all the way to the bottom of who you think you are or need to be, when your humiliating shadow work never stops, and when your securities and protective boundaries mean less and less, and your salvation project has failed you. Last week, we talked quite a bit about the salvation project and what that was all about. You know, it was that idea that we have this plan that we think either theologically or it's doctrinally about what saves us and what doesn't. And when it comes right down to it, that means less and less the more that we move into the second half of life, where everything is now coming from the inside out and not from the outside in. That we're able to actually embrace uncertainty, paradox, and mystery. We're not looking for that certainty anymore that tells us exactly where we are and that we're saved. To imagine the certainty is really the illusion. So to embrace the uncertainty and to move all the way to the bottom of who you think we are, that's the descent that we're talking about. That is the letting go, the relinquishing of our second half of life journey. And then what happens is stars as well as friends are angry with the noble ruin. Saints depart in several directions. Rohr writes, when you have faced the hurt and the immense self-doubt brought on by good people, family, and even friends who do not understand you, who criticize you, or even delight at your wrongness. So we talked about how when you strike out on a journey like this, people aren't going to understand what you're doing. They're going to be uncomfortable because you're not the same you anymore. You don't fit in the familiar way that they've known you. Jesus said that if you think I came to bring you peace, understood as calm or tranquility, the truth of the matter is, he said, I came to bring a sword. And that division is going to start in your own home. It's going to be between husband and wife and parents and children. Those people closest to you are the ones who are going to feel the difference in you the quickest. And it's not like they're always going to embrace it. Most of the times that they won't. And so it's a difficulty. This is the loss that we face. We were talking about that just yesterday, and the grieving that we face when we end up moving in directions that the people closest to us are not comfortable with and don't feel that they can follow. And we end up losing some relationships if we're willing to go in new directions. And this is all dealing with that. And this next couple lines is as far as we went last week. Be still. There is no longer need of any comment. The inner life of quiet, solitude, and contemplation is the only way to find your ground and purpose now. Go nowhere else for sustenance. We talked about how there's just no point in explaining or trying to justify where you are and what you're starting to discover on your second half of life journey. There's no point in debating a lot of issues with people who aren't going to understand or aren't going to accept you. And so you move back just into that quiet and that solitude. Honest dialogue, yes, we're ready to have honest dialogue. But the more that you move into the second half of life, at least this has been my experience, and maybe this is something that we can kick around a little bit, more and more you have lost your need to be right, your need to be correct, your need to debate every issue and try to convince other people that you're right. Have you all noticed that as you move further into this journey? If you look back on your past, it was always so important to be right, to debate every point, to justify the points that you feel were important. Are you feeling that that need is kind of falling away at this point in life?
I disagree with that, Dave.
Sorry. Well, I would expect that from you, Vaughn. Go ahead. That's it.
That was it. I have no more points to make than that.
Now it's time for the rim
I'm
shot.
satisfied.
That was a Scott joke, and I missed it. I went right over my head.
Yeah.
I thought you were launching out into something. Okay, Vaughn, I'm with you now.
No, that was it.
Okay.
Scott got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
I would say, Dave, that I notice that, yeah, it's not worth sweating the small stuff anymore. And sometimes you're still around people who generally are the same age as me or older, and they're not. They're still interested in being right, or they still want to debate everything. So it's kind of like I can start to see the difference now and, let it go and just let them talk because, they're not going to change my mind about anything, and I'm not going to change their mind about anything. So you just let it go and show a little grace, I guess, and let it go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else, does debating these points really seem all that important anymore?
Who was it last night that said, "Alrighty then"? I mean, that sounds like a perfect answer to most of these arguments. Alrighty then, right?
That was
That
our
was
Daniel.
It
Randy.
was Danielle, I
Yeah.
think.
Was it?
Yeah.
That's right.
But isn't that also the comment, whatever?
Yeah, whatever.
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 But I'll tell you, I mean, from my point of view, it's just like, whenever I feel myself being dragged into another debate, it just feels so exhausting. I just really don't really care about debating anymore. I know
Yeah.
sometimes we've got to do it, and sometimes we need to have, and to have an honest conversation with someone who is seriously trying to understand something in a different way. That's different, but someone that it just wants to debate points, that's a whole different ball of wax. And I guess I've had to do it so much in my life as a pastor, especially one that, as Vaughn so, affectionately calls me, a functional heretic. Then it was just part and parcel to the first 10, 15 years of my pastorate. But anymore, it just doesn't hold the appeal.
Something I say is, you could be right.
Yeah, good
You
phrase.
could be right, and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Good Al-Anon response.
Yep, it's an Al-Anon response. You could be
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
You could be right.
Here comes
Let it go.
William.
Here comes William.
William?
So it's I think what he's showing us here in this poem, it's almost like the Beatitudes. If you think about the Beatitudes, the way we portrayed them, you've got 8 different facets, 8 different portraits of the person who has now become a kingdom person, right? And all of these characteristics and all of these traits, Jesus is laying on one after another to give us the full portrait, a 3D rendering of what this kingdom person looks like. The same sort of thing is going on here. Stanza after stanza, we're getting more and more of a portrait, more facets, more views of this person who has moved into a second half of life, understanding, perception, worldview. And this is one of them. There's no longer need of comment. There's no longer need of trying to justify or debate. The person is willing to, have to suffer the grief of losing certain relationships or letting friends go their way because they're committed to the direction that they're taking. So all of these things, as we start to pile them up layer by layer, is giving us a deeper understanding of what the second half of life position looks like. As we're moving into the second half of life, we can see how these are affecting us as well. And so this is why this is a really important thing for us to try to understand. The last couple of chapters of the book and this coda have all been about trying to finish up the portrait that he's been painting for the entire book of what this second half of life person looks like. He goes on. It was a lucky wind that blew away his halos with his cares, a lucky sea that drowned his reputation. Now, this is where it's starting to get really interesting, okay? It was a lucky wind. He calls it lucky. Well, let's read what Rohr says about it. This is the necessary stumbling stone that makes you loosen your grip on the first half of life and takes away any remaining superior self-image. Parentheses, Merton is calling this crossover point lucky, and surely sees it as part of necessary and good suffering that the soul needs in order to mature. So It's a lucky wind that blew away his halo with his cares. Okay, what's the halo representing? If we're talking about a second half of life person who has descended into, you know, the stripped away place where everything has been stripped away, it's a lucky wind that blew away his halos with his cares.
Well, I also see the halo like with saints, right? So it's
Yep.
more probably like a holier than thou attitude. So
Okay.
when you take it away, I'm no longer holier than thou.
Okay.
Or humbling, maybe. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the halo can represent piety.
Mm.
And you know, Ellen, you're saying holier than thou, but you know, and that can definitely be part of it. But even it's just the sense of one's own piety, the sense of one's having accomplished some kind of spiritual advancement, whatever that is, that sense that probably is a kind of pride, right? That sense of who this person feels that they are in terms of their own spiritual formation. It's a lucky wind that blew that away, along with his cares. So what are the cares about?
As far as the halo goes, before you move on to the
Oh, sure,
cares
go
real
ahead.
quick, wouldn't the halos be representational of person's worldview or their religious view? When you talk
Absolutely,
about
sure.
being blown away and redefined and reassessed by all of us as we approach our second half or live out our second half. Okay, just want to clarify.
Yeah, maybe put it, maybe, you know, to try to incorporate all of that. It would be a person's own, maybe spiritual or religious identity, the way
Yeah.
they see themselves
Yeah.
in their spirituality. And that incorporates, I think, what Scott's talking about as well. It's all of those things. But remember, this is the way we see ourselves. If we feel that we have made some kind of advancement or achievement in our spiritual formation, it's a lucky wind that blows all of that away, along with our cares. And the cares can be, well, they can be our concerns, of course, but I think it's also important to think of them as our preferences too. Because one of the things that really starts to go away as you become more and more unattached to temporal things, more and more unattached than to preferences, the things that you consider good, the things that you consider bad, the things that you're attracted to and try to cling on to, and the things that you don't, that you try to avoid, all of those start to go away as well. You don't have those strong preferences anymore because you don't have strong attachments anymore. You've dropped your nets at the shore to follow, right? You've sold everything that you own in order to follow. This is, again, getting back to the Gospels and the way they're portrayed in the Gospels. You know, to blow away your sense of your own religious identity or your sense of achievement spiritually, along with your preferences, along with your judgments, of course. Getting back to Jesus, don't judge, because that also has to do with your preferences, your concerns. For all of that to be blown away by a lucky wind, and then a lucky sea that drowned his reputation. What's the reputation part?
Well, I was thinking about when you were talking about cares, I guess I was thinking of reputation as well. Basically, it's anything that we want people to know about us. I think Frank Billman used to talk about this idea of like whatever you want people to know about you and whatever you don't want people to know about you is part of that ego that we need to somehow transcend. So that reputation, be it good or bad, you know, along with our cares, are the things that we need to let go of.
I think that's perfect. Maybe it's the view or the opinion that others have of us, right?
Mhm.
So it's a lucky
Or
sea
it
that
could
drowns
be,
that.
it
Go ahead,
could
Kathy.
be, it could be you standing on all of your achievements and, you know, stripes that you earned in life, and you're just kind of, that becomes less important and more important about just who you are and less of what it says about you and what your resume looks like, kind of a thing.
Mm.
Letting that go. Very similar to what William just said.
Yeah.
Christopher and Anya, By all means, jump in anytime if you got a question or a comment or want to add some thoughts, just press your space bar down. Just wanted to let you know to jump in. Don't wait for an invitation.
Yeah, thanks. You're just really just soaking in everything.
Yeah.
There's
And
a
now
lot to
that,
soak in.
William's here, Chris and Anya, we wanted to introduce, William, we went through it. Chris and Anya are coming to us from Barbados.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so can you,
Welcome.
can you introduce
Welcome.
yourself to them?
Oh, I'm William. I'm in New York. I've been part of this group for 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. And it's one of my favorite little addictions, I suppose. So yeah, welcome. I'm sure you guys will enjoy.
Yeah.
Now,
Nice to meet you.
William was actually here with us in Southern California, South Orange County, and you moved back to Brooklyn. How long ago was it? 4 years, 3 years now?
2 years now.
2 years now. Okay.
Yeah.
Seems like more, William, because we miss you, buddy.
And Jerry too, Dave. She came in
Oh,
late.
that's right. Jerry, where are you? Where's Jerry?
Sorry, my camera fell.
Okay.
Camera.
You in that camera, Jerry.
Yeah, my
We're-
camera.
We're introducing ourselves to Chris and Anya.
Hi, Chris and Anya. I'm Jerry.
Hi,
I'm here
Jerry.
in Southern California and go to the Effect on Sundays. So,
How long you been coming to the effect, Jerry?
God, I was trying to remember. It's been a long years. I don't know.
It's been around 15 or 16, somewhere in there.
It's a long time I've been coming. Yeah. And I'm addicted to these things too. So welcome, welcome. So glad you joined us. How'd you find us?
I was scrolling through YouTube listening to Richard Rohr and wanted to buy his book Falling Outward. And then I pop up on you guys.
Oh, wonderful.
Hmm.
Are
You
gonna
actually
join
let
us?
with your background, Jerry, let us know you're right here in Barbados with us.
It does, doesn't it?
Well,
I've never
William,
been to
Ri-
Barbados, but you have the kind of water that I like. The nice, calm, smooth, green, blue.
Yeah.
Uh,
But William, you're originally from?
Guyana.
Oh, okay.
That's not too far from us.
Yeah. A hop, skip, and a jump away.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we've got all the introductions out of the way now, but this is important. Again, the whole point of this, remember the first half of life is about acquisition, the second half of life is about relinquishment. If we really have gone through the process of relinquishing, stripping away all the illusions that our egoic consciousness builds up around ourselves, the halos, the cares, the preferences, and eventually even the reputation, the things that we believe either people think about us or what we've built up for ourselves or what people really do think about ourselves, but to let all of that go. Do you realize how difficult this is? I mean, this is everything about our identity, everything about who we think we are, everything that we've worked so hard in the first half of life to build up. To really let that go, how often does that happen? And it's going to come off in layers. It's not going to happen all at once, and we're going to think we laid things down, and then we're going to realize that we've run and picked them back up again emotionally. And that's just the way that it goes, 2 steps forward and a step back. But
Find
then
it
Merton
interesting.
calls this a lucky wind and a lucky sea. He's seeing it as something that we would normally think of as being either disastrous or like a little death to lose these things that we have so carefully built. But he's saying it's fortunate that it happens. It's necessary that it happens. That necessary stumbling stone or the necessary suffering that Rohr talked about earlier in the book that we debated pretty vigorously. I remember William didn't like that concept very much, but it's part of the process to really get down to the bottom of the dog pile, to really get down to ground zero and be able to see who we really are. That's what humility is all about. Just seeing our relationships as they truly exist and not through the filter of our egoic mind and the illusions that it creates. But this is huge to get to the point where You let these things go. And you can see yourself using the tools, but not being identified with them anymore. It's a huge difference. Any other comments on that one? Okay. Next phrase. Here you will find neither a proverb nor a memorandum. There are no ways, no methods to admire. Rohr's commentary. Don't look forward or backward in your mind for explanations or consolations. Don't try to hide behind any secret special way that you have practiced and now can recommend to all. As we preachy types always feel we must do. Few certitudes now, just naked faith. I love that part about don't try to hide behind any secret special way that you have practiced and now recommend to all. How many times do you see that happening? You know, whether it's YouTube and podcasts or even commercials, the persons who have made it, quote unquote, now are going to tell you all about the formula so that you can make it too, just like I did. You know, just follow my way, my secret path, my method, and you can do everything that I've done and have the same success that I've had. That's still first half of life, even if it seems to be coming from the top of the mountain. You know, to really go into second half of life is to realize there are no charts, there are no diagrams, there's no methods to sell anybody. There's no surefire program. There's no diet or exercise or financial method that you can use to guarantee that you're going to go where this person went. You know, that's the certitude, the certainty that we're always looking for. And we're looking at these people who have gone where we want to go or think we want to go. And then we expect that we're going to get some kind of foolproof plan from them to be able to do the same thing. But when you really get to it, and get to the second half of life mentality, you realize there is no program. The second half of life is like an anti-program, actually. You know, it's the negation of all of that, because all of that is first half of life mentality. It's all looking outward. It's all based in achievement and performance. And really, when it comes down to second half of life, all that stuff starts to go away. We're graduating from all of those ways and means. I remember when I started the journey, I wanted to do it the way I had tried to do everything else in my life. You know, I wanted to lean forward, reach out, grab the thing by its throat and make it mine, because that's the way that I approached anything else. You try to do that with spirituality and you're just banging your head against the wall. It is the exact opposite of that. I remember feeling it's not a leaning forward and a reaching out. It's a leaning backward and a pushing off, just to let yourself fall backward. The way we as kids, remember we'd stand backward at the edge of the pool and just fall backward into the water. You know, it feels more like that. It's just allowing us to fall. It's so different when you actually start to experience the change between first and second half of life. Is that an experience anybody has had? That it's not any longer about acquisition, but about this relinquishment?
Yes.
Can you describe it at all, Scotty?
I just reassessing. It became pretty profound when I moved out to Norco last year, when I was downsizing from a 4-bedroom house and 3 bathrooms and into my 3-bedroom, 2-bath place. And then finally out here to rent a room for my sister. My whole life changed and my life got simpler. Things that used to be important to me or that I felt really driven to accomplish or need or felt like I needed in my life in order to feel like I've done something or feel good about myself are no longer as important as they used to be. Now it's really about relationships, people, and peace, and not so much acquiring this and that, things that make you happy for 10 minutes and then you wonder what the heck you're going to do with them and sell them at a quarter of what you paid for them. If you're lucky, you just don't give them away.
Right.
But that was so profound to live in a retirement village like that, 18,000 people of retirement age, and see every week when I go down to the dumpsters just filled with end tables and nightstands and computers and pictures and frames and beautiful paintings and stuff that most people would find to be very attractive stuff if they saw it hanging on the wall in a store. And when you get to be that place in life where they used to affectionately call it God's waiting room for the people that were getting up there in age as they continue their aging process. But for those people, they did a lot of reassessments as you look around all the time because you're working with limited space. And so for me, I didn't fight it. I didn't feel a need to fight it. I felt it was possibly the answer to the change that I was looking for as I went through my life and wondered about why certain things are the way they are. And as the more I simplified my life, the more peaceful I became, the more I spent time with people and friends instead of things and situations. And so my life continues on. Life throws a curveball once in a while, and most of you guys have been around me long enough to see how I'm choosing to deal with that. And with God's help, I'll be around a lot longer.
Amen.
So
Amen.
that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier, Dave, is that, when we're younger or in our younger years, we're taught to go after what you want and, be ambitious and go for the gusto, and you got to ask for what you want and things. And I think that's important in the first half of life and the first half of your adult life. You really are, you're fired up with your passion to go for those things. But there's a shift. There's a shift later that takes place, like what Scott's saying, and you can start to see it. You even see it as you're going through your career. You start to feel differently and say, wow, 10 years ago, I really would have pushed myself for that or gone for the throat on this one, but it's not that important to me now anymore. So you just you can start to see the shift. Like you say, it's a peeling of the onion. It doesn't happen all at once, but it just starts to pivot slowly. So yeah, I saw that too.
Mhm. It's funny, if you look at my notes, both the sermon notes and notes for the studies and everything that I've done for the past 25 or 30 years now, the ones in the first 10 or 12 years, they're full of charts, and the graphics and the charts and all of these, Venn diagram looking things, trying to map out all of these theological principles and all that. You look at my notes from the last 10 years, there's none of that anymore. It's just like, I am so done with charts, trying to define all of this stuff. It's a whole different, and it's not to say that there isn't a place for charts and to try to diagram things and get certain points across. But you start to realize that I used to think that those charts really represented something, right? And I realized they can point in a direction, I suppose, but they're so less important to me now because I realize you can't quantify this thing in a logical, rational way. It is so much a function of pure experience that only can take place when we just push back and fall away. It's such a different experience, Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to keep working, doesn't mean that we're not going to keep planning, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to keep striving for excellence in everything we do to our last breath. But to not be attached to those activities anymore makes all the difference in the world. You are not the job, you are not the role, you are not the achievement. You're using all of that as tools to get where you need to go, to improve living conditions for people around you, to keep your family together. Those are the things that we do, and we need to do them, and we need to take them seriously. If we're not taking them seriously, then we're not fulfilling our purpose either. But no longer with the mistaken identity, and that changes everything. It changes our anxiety level. It raises our trust level. All things change when we finally start to move in this other type of mindset. Now, for anybody, is this starting to feel like a cop-out? Is it starting to feel like the fire extinguisher of ambition? Is it starting to feel like, that this is I don't know, an abdication of our responsibilities? Is there anything like that in what we're saying in your minds?
Well, I was thinking are there people, or does one have to go through the first half to go through the second half? You know, the no attachments, no achievements, and the person is okay. Are there
Wait,
people like
ask that again, Ellen. I'm not
you
sure.
know, does one have to go through the first half of life with achievements, accomplishments, the attachments, the ego? Does one have to go through the first half? Are there people who can go to the second half?
No,
Not
we
calling it
do,
the second half, but they're already at that stage.
we do need to go through the first half. And Rohr makes a huge point of that. You know, the first half of life is building the container of our lives. You know, it's a container for our sense of self. It's a container for that egoic consciousness. And it's also the container from which we operate and build everything we need to build in life. And so if you don't do the first half of life well and in a healthy way and create a good container, then there's really nothing to pour the content of the second half of life into, is the imagery that he used. But yes, we do need to have a well-developed sense of self. And then we need to step away from it in the second half of life. We still need it. We're never going to not need that as long as we're drawing breath. Our egoic mind, our consciousness, our self-awareness, that's the interface that we have with the rest of the world. And so we need that. But we need it to be clear so that we can actually mirror people back, when we talked about the mirror chapter, right? And we're not projecting onto them our unfinished business if we haven't done the first half of life journey well. But that's not to say that everybody does this in the same chronological time frame. You know, we talked about some of these young Jewish, usually women, like Anne Frank and Eddie Hilsum, you know, living in Europe in the 40s during World War II. They moved into second half of life spirituality when they're still in their teens. And the things that they wrote and left behind are beautiful renditions of second half of life spirituality. But the intensity of the circumstances they were living pushed them through rather quickly. But it doesn't mean that they didn't do first half of life work, you know, but it was in a very compressed time scale because of what they were living through at the time. But we do need to do both. And we need both always. Remember, the more advanced stages of spiritual development include the lower stages. And so it's always going to be a both and not an either or. You know, first stage of half of life is not bad and the second good. They are both good and they are both necessary. But until and unless we gain the second half of life perspective, then we are limited and stunted in our spiritual growth. We need both.
And just to be clear, I think, Dave, what you're also saying is not to make everybody think that when you are in the second half of life, you just become this deadbeat and you're just a blob and there's no passion or anything in your life. I mean, you certainly, I mean, I think for me, I have passion, but my passions are different than they were, you know, 20 or 25 years ago. They're different now. So it's a lot like Scott said, you know, I'm more passionate about the spiritual journey I'm on. I'm more passionate about my friendships and relationships and, you know, getting to know people differently than maybe just I did when I was younger. So, yeah, I mean, it's still passion. It's just not that we become, you know, deadbeats. We're doing other things that are passionate, but we're just doing different things.
Just a quick question. Is there a healthy way in terms of guiding, again, like younger children? Like we have 3 children, a 15-year-old, an 11, and a 4. And usually we try to talk to them about everything, and we're still learning along this spiritual journey. So every time we learn something new, we often try to break it down, you know, and have conversations with our children, because again, having to spend again half your life going through certain experiences, and then we tell ourselves, well, we wish that we had arrived here a lot earlier than we are at right now. We've developed a practice as parents to try to talk to our children. So as we learn something new, or we get a eureka kind of moment, we try to break it down for them, to see if they can understand and comprehend. I remember talking to my daughter just a couple of days ago and telling her, you know, we're trying to help you to become more like a wise person, someone you can who can contemplate on situations. So we be trying to explain them again the same idea of, you know, having the falls and not being frustrated by it, but recognizing that it's going to help make you stronger and these kind of things. So just wondering if there is a healthy way to help younger folks to be able to pass through it maybe a lot earlier than you yourself were able to.
One of the things that Rohr, and when you do get your book, when you get to the chapter on mirroring, it's going to be that'll be a real important chapter, I think, for you in terms of you raising your children. Because the point he makes is that when children have elders around them, parents and other elders who can accurately mirror back what they see in them and not be projecting their own dysfunction onto them, that is the healthiest way for a child to be able to develop his or own sense of self. The most important thing that we can do as parents is allow our children to develop a strong and healthy sense of themselves, who they are, in all of their unique differences. You know, they don't need to be like their brother or their sister. They are who they are. And if you as parents can mirror that back to them and reinforce their own strengths and their own uniqueness, and they can develop that healthy sense of self, that's going to be huge for them, because that's what the first half of life is about, is building that healthy sense of self, the things that they can do, the skills that they have, that they can then build their own platforms in life as they move into young adulthood. And then by their mid-30s and 40s, then they're going to be getting the call to the second half of life, which is the relinquishment of all of that, not in terms of letting it go that they've built up, but in terms of realizing that's not who they are, that there is a deeper self that transcends all of that. But for you as parents to allow them and to reinforce who they are, who you see in them, the strength that you see in them, and allow that to play out in your household, that would be huge. And it's all part of your ability to be raising your children with a second half of life mentality, but not trying to rush theirs, because they do need, in their first half, in their 20s especially, and into their 30s, they need to have a first half of life mentality. That's how we build up family and career and all the things that we're going to need as we go through life. Did that make any kind of sense to you?
It did. Thanks very much.
Okay. And there will be more also that he talks about, but that's the one that came to mind the strongest when you asked the question. But I think you'll find some other bits and pieces, because he talks about how our children don't have elders around them anymore. They don't have anyone who can model these second half of life principles and values. And if you are doing that for your kids, it's immeasurable what they're going to be able to take out of their childhood with them. Did anyone else have a thought on that?
I just wanted to say, I thought the question was really good, because and it's not really, I mean, I guess it is talking about this, but coming to the book at the end, but I'm also picking up some of the pieces, because in church, I hear you talking about some of the things that are also related to this book. So I'm able to pull the pieces together. But I like that you brought up about being a parent and helping a child, you know, your children walk through this sense, right, with grace. I think it's awesome that you teach them this, because not everybody has, like Dave was saying, this mirror to bounce off of. But at the end of the day, like, pain is pain is pain. And what I'm hearing from this, and it might be different, is like, as we're getting these accomplishments throughout life, but there's this point where you get to where it's like, what more to life? What is there more? And throughout the life, there's lots of pain. There's a lot of hurt. There's trauma. There's great experiences. There's not so many great experiences, but every time you feel that or experience a certain situation, that feeling is the same. So whether you're 5 years old or you're, 80 years old, if you feel pain and you feel like something's the end of the world, right? If you have someone there to tell you, like, with grace, you know, it's okay to feel that, you know, we're going to keep going on and we're going to be okay. I think that's the best thing you can do as a parent, to walk them through that. And I think it does help them with ease as they get older or they go towards the second half of life, to be able to walk with grace and come into acceptance of where we are and who we are. So anyways, I really liked your question, and that's the spiel I had to say.
That's great, Allison. And you know, that brought up some of what we talked about in the previous book. Remember, Owning Your Own Shadow, the Robert Johnson book? And the fact that in many of our homes, we as parents, we teach our children what they can project out into the home and what they have to stuff down. And a lot of it is the negative behavior and the aggressive behavior. Okay, well, societally, that's not acceptable. And the child learns from us that that's not acceptable. And so they repress that. They put that down into the shadow. But a lot of times it's their strengths. Now, a child's strength, that they have a strong will or something, that's going to serve them really well as an adult. But as a child, it's just a pain in the butt, right? You got to deal with that strong will and everything that they do. So you're going to disapprove of that as well. And they're going to end up pushing that down. To let our children be able to express themselves as much as possible, as long as it's not pounding on their siblings or anything, right? But to express themselves as much as possible, so their strengths, their superpowers don't end up in the shadow as well, repressed, because they're not acceptable to the parents or not acceptable to the family. Again, I think that's also part of good mirroring, to allow the kids to see through you, their strengths and their weaknesses, but to develop a really strong sense of self because they're allowed to in the home. And that takes a lot of energy on the parents' part, obviously. It's a lot easier to just bring a ironclad rule of the house and everybody follows it. You know, that's the easy way to do it. But if we're talking about graduating obedience and being able to start living from the inside out, then really bringing our full attention and presence to each moment and deciding what love requires at that moment is always going to be the best thing for everyone involved. But
reminded Dave of that saying that you say once in a while. I'll see if I can remember it. Preach the gospel on all occasions, but only when necessary, use your words.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really appropriate here, Christopher and Anya. I have a 36-year-old daughter, and she learns way more by watching me respond and react to life than whatever comes out of my mouth, that's for sure. They say that a child will often do as you do, not what you say. So part of the solution, I think, utilizing the tools in this book is understanding mirroring, which Dave brought up, as well as understanding that we are being watched at all times. And that really is a great teaching method. When people see what you do and see that it works, there's no better example.
Good stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, we better move ahead, because if we don't finish this book tonight, I am cooked. All right. All right, backing up 2 lines. There are no ways, no methods to admire where poverty is no achievement. His God, this disciple with a serene soul, his God lives in his emptiness like an affliction. I'm sorry, his God lives in his emptiness like an affliction. There's a very strange line, right? Rohr writes, this is nothing you have come to or crawled down to by effort or insight. You were taken there, and your there is precisely nothing. That is, it is everything, but not what you expected everything to be. This kind of God is almost a disappointment, at least to those who were in any way using God up to now. Right? Huge statement there. There is nothing to claim anymore. God is not a possession of any type, not for your own ego or morality or superiority or for control of the data. This is the nada, nothing of John of the Cross and the mystics. This is Jesus on the cross, yet it is a peaceful nothingness and a luminous darkness while still an affliction. You know, I think this is one of the hardest truths of all for us to absorb in the second half of life. That what we really have is an unassuming God. We look at God as the king of the universe. We look at God as the top of the pyramid. We look at God as magnificent and beautiful. But what we have in Jesus, if Jesus is really modeling this God for us, his Father, then we realize that God is humble. God is unassuming. God is not putting on any airs. God is the type of God that we would probably walk right by, searching for the God of our own imaginings. And if we are using this God as a model for us to assume that same top of the heap position, as so many religious do, then this God is going to be a disappointment. This God is going to appear to us as an affliction as we move into the relinquishment of the second half of life. That nothingness, that nada, that John of the Cross, a Spanish mystic from the 16th century, the way he described moving into a faith that is so pure that it looks like nothing. He called it the dark ray of faith. It's like the safety net is removed as we move into this deeper place where we are letting go. I mean, this is getting deep into the idea of mystical practice, but the idea here is if we are expecting God to exalt us, if we are looking for that kind of exaltation, we're going to get to the point where we're going to be really disappointed because that's not the way this works. To just be able to be in the moment, no matter how seemingly insignificant, and yet still have it be enough for us, is a completely different experience than the one we imagine when we begin the journey with first half of life expectations and perspective. And unfortunately, since most of our churches are also first half of life expressions, group expressions, they're reinforcing this idea. And as we move into second half of life, it tears it back down again. So he writes, what choice remains? Well, to be ordinary is not a choice. It is the usual freedom of men, he adds, and women without their visions. And here's how he wraps it up. In the second half of the spiritual life, you are not making choices as much as you are being guided, taught, and led, which leads to choiceless choices. These are the things that you cannot not do because of what you have become, things you do not need to do because they are just not yours to do, and things you absolutely must do because they are your destiny and your deepest desire. Now, I'm not too thrilled with the word destiny. I would probably substitute purpose or will in the sense of Sebyanah, we talked about in the Aramaic, which means deepest purpose, desire, delight. But you get what he's saying here. Things you absolutely must do because they are your deepest purpose and your deepest desire. Your driving motives are no longer money, success, or the approval of others. You have found your sacred dance. Now, your only specialness is being absolutely ordinary and even choiceless, beyond the strong opinions, needs, preferences, and demands of the first half of life. That's so huge and key. Relates back to what we were just talking about before. We think that we need to make ourselves special. We need to stand head and shoulders above the crowd in order to be noticed, approved, loved, even by God. That's the whole performance-based first half of life understanding of spirituality. But in the end, you start to realize you are loved and accepted by God because you're the same, not because you're different. That is the radical conclusion of the love that Jesus is trying to get across to us. The sun and the rain fall on the just and unjust alike. There is no difference in God's love. It is completely indiscriminate. It is completely degreeless. And so not only now your only specialness is being absolutely ordinary and even choiceless, beyond the strong opinions, needs, preferences, and demands of the first half of life. You do not need your visions anymore. You're happily participating in God's vision for you. With that, the wonderful dreaming and the dreamer that we were in our early years have morphed into someone else's dream for us. We move from the driver's seat to being a happy passenger who is still allowed to make helpful suggestions to the driver. So we can still be backseat drivers, okay? We are henceforth a serene disciple, living in our own unique soul as never before. Yet, paradoxically, living within the mind and heart of God and taking our place in the great and general dance. I think what happens in the second half of life is that we begin to see more and more that we actually achieve ourselves nothing lasting. All we can really do is become ready to receive that which is already here and available to us and always has been. It's only that it got covered over starting in our childhood because of the fears and the traumas and the things that we experience. But it's always been here. So it's not our achievement, it's not our acquisition, it is about becoming ready to receive. And we're only ready to receive when we become emptied of all of our need to achieve something, our need to acquire something. When all of that can be something that we step away from, then we're actually ready to receive something that we can never give ourselves anyway. And that feels like a death at first. That feels like a loss at first. Not to have any visions, to be ordinary, to be the same as everyone else, that's something that just doesn't compute, especially in the first half of life. So when we've spent our entire first half of life, our life to date, trying to earn the reward and the approval of others by being different, that's going to be a real shock to the system when we get to the second half of life and realize that we're loved only because we're the same as everybody else, and that everybody else gets the same reward. No matter what time you go to the fields to work, right? You're going to end up getting paid the same. All of these sayings of Jesus start to take on a new life and a new importance and even urgency when you look at them through the lens of this second half of life understanding. Now the first half of life is going to see all of this as deflating, seeing all of it as demoralizing. But in the second half of life, you're going to see it as liberating. It's not going to have those negative contexts anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that in one of the sections of the book, when we were talking about like the egoic mind, and as you were just saying, we have in that first half we have those attachments to our accolades, success, all of these different kind of things. But when I was first hearing that, I thought, gosh, I got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, for me anyway, I think you have a temperate ego. You have humility, an ego that can experience humility. But I still think that, like if I can use Allison, I don't know you very well, but I've met Ryan before. But knowing that what you guys are doing with your CBD, it's like there's going to be success for you, but you've chosen a path where you're doing much for many people. And so to me that it's a shift. We can still do things, we can still accomplish things, but it's just more in a temperate way. And again, you don't have to throw out whatever accolades or success you've had. And there's a lot of people here that have, we got doctors and therapists and I mean, just wonderful people, but they turning it around. Like when I listen to William, he takes what we're learning in this book and he's taking it to his clients and walking them through that, and I appreciate that part of it,
And you're
I can be
absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Tony. That's exactly right. We end up losing nothing. But in order to realize that, you have to be willing to let everything go, because you don't know what the limiting parts are until you let them go. And then you wait and see what then comes back to you. But you don't give up your ego. You don't give up your achievements, your skills, the things that you have built. But by not being attached to them anymore or identified with them anymore, it takes on a whole different experience. I'm probably working just as hard as I did 30 years ago. And, my wife called me a workaholic then, and she still can call me a workaholic now. But I know the difference. Inside, I know that the tail's no longer wagging the dog in the same way that it did. Now, my stone's not yet smooth yet. I still got my layers that are coming off. And so I'm still working on this. but to become less and less attached to the work that I do, even as I continue to do it and do it as hard and as well as I can. The anxiety is falling away. The trust is building up, and it's a very different experience. And yet I'm still working a lot harder than I thought I would be at this age, you know, but that's the way it goes, right? But Tony, you're absolutely right. That's the point we're trying to make. That's the both and.
I was wondering if you could enlighten us about the section about law. And I resisted that whole section, to be honest with you. In my own way, I'm kind of a rebel, you know. I don't conform very well. But that section on law, I think if I wrote this down right, it says, you know, Rohr says that without law in some form, we can't move forward. So I'd like you to
Where is the
explain
section? Where is this section, Tony?
Oh gosh,
It's way back further.
page 74, maybe?
Oh,
Yeah.
No,
okay.
He's way back in the
74 was-
earlier part of the book.
yeah. It's been a while.
You know, Tony, and I know we're running out of time here, so we'll wrap it up quickly, but to try to go there, the idea here is that unless you build a good first half of life container, like we just said, you have nothing in which to put the content of the second half of life. We need the self and the first half of life to be done well. You cannot do that without law. Law is what within the group, within the community and the society, is what allows us to be able to live well with each other. And we need to learn the outside in restrictions before we can then graduate those and substitute with an inside out, just basic purpose and desire. And so law is essential for building that. You know, Anya and Chris were talking about raising their children, and Allison as well. You know, it is when children are small, they just need rules. They need restrictions. That's what actually gives them a sense of comfort, to know that there is something solid that they can lean up against as they're growing up. Those are the rules that give children the ability to develop a good and healthy sense of self. We need that. And then we need to transcend it. At one point, Rohr says you need to know the rules before you can break them, right? You need to know what the rules are, and then you need to know the reason why the rules exist. And then you need to understand how you fulfill those moment to moment from the inside out by bringing your full consciousness, your full presence, and your desire to do the loving thing, which is going to change. Sometimes that's going to be the lawful thing, and sometimes it's going to be the unlawful thing. It just depends. Is lying always wrong? You know, we always go back to that. No, it's not always wrong. It's unlawful, but sometimes it's the righteous thing to do because it does preserve life and relationship. And so that's the reason that law is essential, but we still need to graduate from it. James calls it the law of liberty. When you get to the place that you're living the law from the inside out, it feels like freedom and no longer like restriction, even though you're still playing by the rules, quote unquote. I hope that helps. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we are over time, but we did it. I'll let you guys read the glossary, the index, and all the notes on your own. We're not going to do that. But we actually finished this little tiny book, and it took us a year to do it. So we've got an even smaller book coming up now, starting next week. And I promise we really will start Practice of the Presence of God next week. And hopefully it's not going to take us an entire year. It is a very small book, but it's just packed with stuff. And I think it's going to be a great follow-on to Falling Upward, because now we can see, what does second half of life spirituality look like in daily activities of living? And that's what I think. Yes, thank you. Kathy is showing us the book. Make sure you have that one.
Hopefully I have the right one. I think I do.
Because there are dozens of this book, editions of this book, and we'll never be on the same page otherwise. So get the
And then
one.
look, it's thin, so it won't take us a year for sure.
It won't take us a year. No, we're going to knock it right out. Yeah, that's what I always say. Okay. Thank you guys so much. You are the few, the proud, the bitter enders, and made it all the way from February to February. So we're so proud of you. And Allison and Chris and Anya, thanks for showing up a week early, and look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll kick into the new study. Does anyone have just a last statement? that they just need to make to mark the end of this year?
It's been hard work. It's been hard work. I have to say, for me, it's been hard work. And I have to go back and do some more reading because it's hard. That last paragraph, I'm like, what?
Yeah, and we didn't get a chance to break that down, but we can always talk about that later. But
It's
you're
okay.
absolutely
I
right,
just
Jerry.
but it's all been worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at the effect it's had for me, and so glad I've been a part of it.
Cool. It is
And
the
thank
hardest
you,
thing you
Dave.
will ever do is to jump into second half of life spirituality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's
It
why
is.
it requires everything of us.
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely everything. But then when you do it, you realize you've lost nothing, and you've only been able to gain the insight of what the truth really is all about. So it's a
Well,
beautiful
thank you for
thing.
doing the book, Dave. As
you're
Kathy
so
Thank you
said,
welcome.
for your.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, Scotty.
All right.
Father God, we're so grateful for this book and the time we spent together fellowshipping and studying and looking for the meanings of the things we're reading and how to apply them and how to run our lives based on the lessons we learn. But nothing teaches us better than your love that you have for us, our Jesus, constantly displayed in all creation. So we're grateful, Father. Thank you for all the love that you have, that you pour out on us day to day. Help us to understand the first half and what to do with the stuff we've learned in the first half so that we have an enjoyable second half and learn to serve others in our second half. Thank you, Lord Jesus. It's in your holy name that we pray and we give our thanks and say our amens.
Amen.
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 Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. All right.
Bye-bye.
See you Sunday, one way or another.
All right,
All right,
everybody.
good night, guys.
Bye.
Good night, Chris.
night.
Good night, Anya. Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Up and away.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Anya.
Bye, guys. All right.
Okay. See y'all soon.
Bye.
And bye,
Bye.
Jana, and bye, Linda. All right.
Bye, Linda. Bye, Dave. See you guys on Sunday.
See you
Okay.
guys.
What's that, Linda?
I did it again. I couldn't see you guys the whole time.
You
What am
need
I
to
doing?
leave your computer alone.
I
Stop
didn't
fiddling
do
with it.
anything to it.
You did something. So yeah, just when John sets you up, stand back. Don't touch anything. Just enjoy the evening.
I thought I had been doing that.
Well, you did something, obviously, if you turned off the visuals. Yeah.
I don't remember doing it, but I just don't, I feel like I'm out, not a part of, you know?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Don't touch anything. Keep your hands off the computer.
I thought I
and
had
just-
done that, but
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you, dear. I'm not there. So you can't see us?
right now I can, but I clicked on something.
That's what I'm saying. Don't do that. Leave it alone.
But I clicked and it brought you guys back to me, is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
well, then do that sooner.
But that's what you were telling me I shouldn't do.
Well, don't do anything to click us off, but if you do click us off,
I never
click us
did.
back on sooner. I don't know what to tell you because I don't know what you did, dear. I'm
Are
sorry.
other people having that problem?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay. All right.
See you
See you guys this
Sunday, guys.
weekend. All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.